Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission is always the same. We take a stack of compelling sources, articles, research papers, field notes, and distill the most profound nuggets of knowledge for you, the well-informed listener. And today, we're taking a global sprint, looking at one of the most successful international competition shows ever created, The Amazing Race.
That's right. But we're not just breaking down detours and roadblocks here.
No.
Our sources push us far beyond mere entertainment critique.
Wow.
We're analyzing the logistics, the psychology, and the strategic adaptation of the franchise.
Specifically looking at the US, Canadian, and Australian versions.
Exactly. Treating this global competition not as a game, but as a real-world social and psychological experiment.
It truly is. It's a sophisticated microcosm of human behavior under, well, extreme duress. We've collected fan commentary, deep recaps, and even academic analyses of competition stress. And we're going to use this stack to answer some really crucial questions.
We're going to uncover how external global crises, from an industry writer's strike to a worldwide pandemic, didn't just slow the show down, but permanently altered its structure, its runtime, and its strategic dynamics.
And we'll explore the ingenious, almost military-level logistics required to invent a global mobile bubble just to keep the race going. And here's where it gets really interesting. We'll dive into the uncomfortable paradox of why, under intense competitive pressure, the show sometimes seems to reward relationships characterized by intense emotional toxicity.
Our deep dive starts with a comprehensive look at the logistical shifts that define what we're calling the reboot era of U.S. TAR. That's seasons 33 through 36. An era necessitated entirely by external factors.
Okay, let's unpack this. The biggest existential threat to the show's format was, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. The adaptation required for season 33 is just. It's one of the most fascinating logistical stories in reality television history.
It is an incredible display of operational resilience.
Right.
So filming for season 33 started in late February 2020.
Right.
And they had barely begun. They completed only 3 legs in England and Scotland before production had to make that instantaneous decision to just halt.
I found it unbelievable in the source material that the dates were so compressed. The race began on February 22, 2020, and it was suspended just 1 week later on February 28. That's how rapidly the global crisis escalated into an immediate threat for a show like this.
Yeah, a show reliant on international travel. Production had already reached Sweden. The 4th leg was planned for Lapland. But the co-creator, Bertram van Munster, he was getting these concerning updates about rising global cases, particularly throughout Asia, which was on their original itinerary.
Oh, right.
So he contacted CBS, prioritizing safety, and they immediately pulled the plug.
And the original vision, which they had to entirely scrap, was immense. They had planned to visit Austria and Italy, then move into Southeast Asia with stops in Vietnam and Thailand. They also had plans for South America and a highly anticipated first-time visit to Nepal.
All gone.
All those stamps in the passport were immediately erased.
And the resulting suspension lasted for nearly a year and a half. We're talking 19 months total.
19 months.
So when they finally resumed filming in September 2021, the world of travel had fundamentally changed, forcing them to devise that mobile bubble.
How does a global race even establish a self-contained bubble? That sounds like a sci-fi concept applied to logistics.
Well, it required chartering an Amazing Race branded Titan Airways Boeing 757.
Wow.
This aircraft became the transportation system for everyone. All the remaining teams, the production crew, and even, critically, 4 dedicated COVID testing teams who traveled with them.
The source analysis points out something fascinating here. This seemingly drastic measure actually solved a pre-existing chronic problem for the show.
Yes.
The time equalizer of commercial air travel.
That's a powerful tactical shift.
Yeah.
For years, the production had struggled because commercial flights often function as this, unintentional equalizer.
Right, everyone ends up on the same flight anyway.
That's exactly. A team that finished a leg 30 minutes ahead might lose their entire lead just waiting for the only available flight. Or worse, lose time to a lower-ranked team who managed to luck into an earlier connection.
So using the chartered jet eliminates that entirely. It means the time gaps established at the mat could be meticulously preserved between legs.
Precisely. They could control the release. Teams were released from the chartered jet onto the next leg's location in groups based on their previous check-in order. This ability to maintain time gaps dramatically alters the strategic calculus for the top teams.
Sure.
Winning a leg now guarantees a measurable advantage going into the next country, which, wasn't always true in the commercial airport era.
And what was the immediate cost of this 19-month suspension beyond just the course change?
Well, the cast instability was significant. 4 of the original teams couldn't return.
4 teams.
Yeah. There were professional conflicts. Anthony received a promotion. There were personal changes. Carol and Ray broke up, and Carol's work visa had expired. Connie and Sam were expecting a child. And tragically, Taylor and Isaiah faced bereavement after Taylor's brother passed away from COVID-19.
That's a substantial portion of the starting cast lost.
To fill those gaps, they made the rare choice to bring back 2 already eliminated teams,
Oh, interesting.
Michael and Mo, and Arun and Natalia. The course itself had to be completely rewritten, focusing only on destinations with low, controllable COVID rates at the time: Gallen, Lugano, Corsica, Greece, and Portugal.
What's truly remarkable is the feedback on the feel of the resumed race. One producer noted that because there was less public transportation and tourism was so dramatically reduced globally,
Yeah?
the atmosphere of the race felt reminiscent of the early days of tar.
It created a really unique visual experience. We saw much more countryside, sweeping landscapes, fewer bustling city crowds. The pandemic, in a way, forced them back to the fundamentals of adventure travel. It almost gave it this nostalgic early 2000s feel that fans truly appreciated.
It's the ultimate example of a major crisis forcing an unexpected creative win. Now, if the pandemic was an existential threat, the next structural shift was a strategic opportunity handed to the production team by an entirely different crisis: the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike.
Absolutely. The shift to a permanent 90-minute format, beginning with season 35, was entirely market-driven. The WGA strike created massive programming gaps across broadcast television, and CBS needed substantial, unscripted content to fill those primetime slots.
And the Amazing Race production team was apparently thrilled by this. Why did they love the idea of the extra 30 minutes so much?
Because the production always captures vastly more detailed footage that a 42-minute time slot allows them to use. As one producer lamented, there was always so much incredible material left on the floor. The expanded runtime allows for significantly deeper insight into team interactions, cultural experiences, and, critically, the sheer nuance of completing the tasks.
Can you give us an example of what kind of footage gets left out in a 60-minute episode versus a 90-minute one?
Sure. In a compressed 60-minute format, you usually only see the critical moments: the challenge setup, one failure, one success, and the sprint to the mat.
The highlights.
The highlights. In 90 minutes, you can include the slow burn of a team struggling and recovering. You get to hear the deeper strategic conversations in the car, or the philosophical musings about the country they are visiting. You get to see the local interactions that might otherwise be cut for time. It allows you, the viewer, to feel more fully immersed in the experience.
So it's not just more content, it's richer content that addresses the kind of deep dive audience's desire for complexity.
Exactly. It enriches the storytelling by providing that space. However, this transition did cause a bit of a logistical tangle in terms of scheduling the seasons.
The timeline paradox, tell us about that.
Okay, so season 35 was the first to air in the 90-minute format, and it was filmed explicitly with that expanded runtime in mind.
Right.
But the season currently airing as season 36 was actually the original season 35. It had already been filmed and edited for the typical 60-minute length before the strike necessitated the format change.
So they had an already finished 60-minute season just sitting in the can.
Yes, they had 2 choices: either delay the new, planned for 90-minute season, or quickly re-edit the finished 60-minute season S36 to stretch it out. They chose to prioritize launching the newly filmed, intentionally longer S35 first,
Which makes sense.
and then went back and re-edited the older footage to fit the new 90-minute structure for its later air date as S36.
It shows the commitment of the production to ensure the new expanded format felt seamless to the viewers from the jump. The necessity created by the strike truly was seized as an opportunity to permanently enrich the entire product. Beyond the logistics of travel and runtime, the reboot era also fundamentally changed the stakes within the game itself by adjusting mechanics and penalties.
The most dramatic in-game alteration is the no safety net policy, which has been explicitly implemented in seasons 34 and 36, and it seems to be the trend moving forward.
Right.
This meant the total removal of non-elimination legs, or NELs.
That is a fundamental shift in competitive pressure. For years, the NEL was the get-out-of-jail-free card, often paired with a minor speed bump penalty in the next leg.
Now, arriving last means you are unequivocally gone. The analysis argues that this change massively heightens the stakes of every single task from the very first leg.
No second chances.
0. It forces teams to approach every challenge with the pressure of knowing there is zero margin for error.
And speaking of chaos, Season 34 introduced the Scramble. What did that entail?
The Scramble was a new twist introduced in the premiere. It allowed teams to complete the first 3 challenges of the leg in any order they wanted, rather than the prescribed linear order.
That sounds like a production dream for television instant divergence and chaos.
It creates instant strategic divergence. Teams that specialize in mental challenges might choose to tackle the puzzle first to gain a lead, while others might prioritize the physical task. It pushes racers to decide their strategic paths right out of the gate, maximizing their strengths immediately.
Let's delve into the penalty meta because this is where the strategic cost analysis becomes mathematically complex. Quitting a task used to incur a massive penalty. How have penalties evolved?
They have become more standardized, but the timing is the key differentiator. Early seasons featured brutal penalties, like 24 hours for quitting a detour,
A death sentence.
basically a race-ending sentence. The modern standard has settled into 4 to 6 hours for most quits, 4 for a roadblock and 6 for detour, which is survivable if you have a massive lead.
But the nuance, as you mentioned, lies in where and when that penalty is served. The distinction between on the spot and at the pit stop penalties is crucial for a deep understanding of the game.
It is. An on-the-spot penalty, like the 8-hour scramble penalty or even a 10-minute speeding penalty, is infinitely more punishing than one served at the pit stop.
Why is the immediate impact so disproportionately damaging?
Because it exposes you to the competition in real time. If a team receives a 6-hour penalty at the pit stop, they might have already built an hour-and-a-half lead on the last-place team.
So they have a buffer.
They have a buffer. They start the next leg with a deficit but still potentially ahead of another team. But an immediate on-the-spot penalty means you are sitting there watching every other competitor, including those who are hours behind you, walk right past.
So a top-tier team with a strong lead might reasonably risk quitting a difficult challenge for a 6-hour pit stop penalty if they calculate they can finish the leg fast enough to survive.
Exactly. Their strategic cost analysis is completely different from a team in the middle or back of the pack. For a team in 5th place, risking an immediate 8-hour on-the-spot penalty is essentially signing their elimination papers. The sources emphasize that this penalty meta forces teams to consider not just the difficulty of the task, but their current standing relative to the rest of the pack before making any decision to quit.
It transforms the penalty system from a simple time deduction into a high-stakes, real-time strategic choice. It adds layers of strategy that the casual viewer might miss. Now that we've covered the external and structural pressures, let's pivot to the human cost of this high-stakes environment.
This is where the race truly becomes a psychological endurance test. The sources reveal a dark side to competitive success, connecting team conflicts to broader psychological studies on how people function when pushed to their absolute limits.
We naturally assume that the winning formula involves strong communication, mutual encouragement, emotional stability. But the source material highlights a profound, disturbing paradox. Some of the most successful leg-winning teams featured what can only be described as toxic or emotionally abusive dynamics.
The prime historical example is Dave and Rachel from season 20. They were dominant, winning a record-tying 8 legs and the $1 million prize. Yet, their journey was characterized by Dave's consistently controlling and passive-aggressive behavior toward Rachel, leading to frequent meltdowns and public humiliation.
And the high-pressure environment didn't soften him, it just amplified the behavior.
Absolutely. One of the most cringeworthy moments of that season came after a victory, where Dave, standing at the mat, yelled, "Now that's why you listen to your husband." The sources categorize this as public, emotional unraveling, suggesting that the pressure cooker environment allows type A, dominating personalities, to channel that dominance into raw, competitive success.
Even if it destroys the personal relationship.
Exactly. They were divorced the following year.
We saw a more recent and equally disturbing pattern with Vinny and Amber in season 36, the dating nurses.
Vinny frequently employed classic gaslighting and belittling tactics toward Amber, especially when he was the one making navigational or strategic mistakes.
The transcribed dialogue is genuinely difficult to listen to. I remember Vinny missing a turn and immediately blaming Amber, claiming, "You're terrible at communicating."
And when Amber tried to push back or articulate her stress, Vinny escalated, telling her she was draining patience and wasn't trying to be any better. And then he concluded with the incredibly manipulative line, "Baby, I hope you learn from this experience what you're doing to us as a team."
Wow.
He shifted the blame for his error directly onto her emotional failings.
And Amber's confessional response is the ultimate validation that this wasn't just race pressure, it was their pre-existing dynamic amplified. She admitted, I just feel like a failure, and I kind of feel like that a lot in our relationship.
This raises a critical question. If the intense pressure overwhelms the brain's emotional regulation systems, wouldn't mutual support be more important? Why do the sources suggest that aggressive dominance, where one partner is essentially forced into submission, can lead to competitive success?
That's a vital interrogation. Is it possible that the competitive intensity of the race for some teams overrides the need for healthy communication?
The analysis suggests that the goal-oriented focus, the $1 million, is so potent that it allows the dominant partner to steamroll the nuanced decision-making, forcing rapid conclusions, even if those conclusions are emotionally damaging. It prioritizes speed and aggression over collaboration and patience. Furthermore, the show is criticized for tacitly condoning these dynamics by highlighting them for dramatic effect.
And this connects to the psychological framework you mentioned earlier, the audience's response.
Yeah.
When we watch a team like Dave and Rachel win despite their horrible interactions, are we experiencing out-group antipathy? Are we subconsciously rooting for the drama, the conflict, the train wreck, even if we intellectually condemn the behavior?
That's the crux of the issue. We tend to feel that schadenfreude, that pleasure at others' pain or failure, especially when they are competitors, the outgroup. If the toxic dyads are consistently successful, they become compelling television precisely because their relationships are failing in real time while their competitive strategy is succeeding.
The audience tunes in for the volatility. This volatility reinforces the idea that while TAR is technically a pair competition, psychologically it functions more like an isolating, intense individual sport.
We can draw a direct line between the race environment and the psychological data. Sources point to research on child and adolescent athletes,
Okay.
showing that those engaged in individual sports like gymnastics, running, or swimming are statistically far more likely to report anxiety or depression at about 13%. Compared to team sport athletes at 7%.
In a team sport, you can distribute the blame or the anxiety across 11 other players. Here, there are only 2 of you, and the failure is entirely internalized.
And the motivation profile matches this high-stakes environment. Individual athletes are heavily driven by goal-oriented reasons, such as securing a college scholarship at around 30%. Team athletes are usually driven by playing for fun at a staggering 79%.
And the Amazing Race team is chasing $1 million. They are hyper-focused on the goal, not the experience, which ratchets up the internal pressure. What exactly does this extreme, sustained pressure do to the physical body and, more importantly, the mind?
The intense chronic stress causes a surge in cortisol production and neurological fatigue. The critical neurological component that fails under this siege is the limbic medial prefrontal circuit.
That sounds highly academic. How do we translate the failure of the limbic medial prefrontal circuit into layman's terms for the listener?
Think of it as the brain's high-level emotional regulator and executive filter getting completely overloaded and short-circuited. When this circuit fails, the ability to perform complex, nuanced, or delicate tasks disappears. It's why people can spend hours staring at a simple puzzle they would solve instantly under normal conditions. The brain can no longer filter out the panic, the exhaustion, or the internal noise.
We have a perfect illustration of this mental siege. Michelle's 8-hour Mentos Marathon in Amazing Race Canada 3.
That is the quintessential example of the limbic circuit failure. The task was painstakingly arranging tiny Mentos candies to recreate a famous piece of art in Paris. For Michel, the cumulative physical exhaustion, the lack of sleep, and the immense competitive stress meant his cognitive functions were compromised.
He was just gone.
He was trying to arrange minute details while his brain was screaming, fight or flight.
He spent 8 hours struggling, performing a task that should take a fraction of that time, all because his nervous system was overwhelmed.
And this neurological fatigue also affects navigational skills. We see the sheer physical and mental exhaustion leading to poor judgment calls on the road. Think of the Omen driving disaster from US Season 17. Even clean drivers took 8 hours. But Gary and Mallory drove a staggering 9 hours off course.
9 hours? That's almost an entire workday spent driving in the wrong direction. Yet, because of the sheer difficulty of the leg, they still only lost by 15 minutes. It shows the devastating physical and mental impact of that exhaustion on simple direction following.
Exactly. The race punishes both physical and mental fatigue equally. Your physical exhaustion contributes to the neurological fatigue, which then makes simple tasks like finding a landmark or arranging mints feel physically impossible.
Shifting from the internal siege of the individual to external strategy, the sources confirm that modern Amazing Race strategy has formalized cooperation, evolving from informal help into systematic collusion to eliminate the competition.
This marks the definitive rise of the Super Alliance. The most infamous and effective case study is the Mine 5 from season 32. This was a pact of 5 teams who systematically dominated the competition.
5 teams is a massive block. How did they manage to maintain that coalition through the competitive pressure?
Their strategies were multifaceted. They engaged in blatant answer sharing on complex tasks, but their most potent weapon was the coordinated use of the U-turn. By coordinating which non-allied team they targeted, they could effectively guarantee the elimination of any outsider.
So the alliance wasn't just about helping themselves, it was fundamentally about strategic execution against the opposition.
It provided crucial insurance. If one member of the Mine 5 had a bad cab ride or struggled with a tricky puzzle, another member was guaranteed to be ahead, and the rest of the alliance would provide information or cover.
So it minimizes risk.
Right. This mutual protection minimized the risk that defines the middle stages of the race. All 5 teams successfully reached the top 5.
But history suggests these alliances are inherently unstable. When does the loyalty pact invariably dissolve?
As the prize money approaches, they generally hold strong through leg 9 or leg 10, but as they approach the finale, leg 11, the reality of the million-dollar prize supersedes the strategic need for safety. They fall apart because the potential personal gain outweighs the security of the group.
Season 32 also featured a critical flaw in the U-turn implementation that favored the alliance's strategy.
Yes, the U-turn vote was held immediately following a major equalizer, a point where all teams were gathered together. This was heavily criticized because the penalized team had zero opportunity to gain any head start before being U-turned.
Oh, that's brutal.
It essentially turned the U-turn from a hurdle into an unavoidable death sentence, perfectly illustrating how the dominant alliance could execute their elimination strategy with surgical precision.
Speaking of penalties, let's revisit the strategic cost analysis of quitting within the context of these alliances.
The alliance structure adds a layer to the penalty meta. A team in a Mine 5, for instance, might be more willing to risk a penalty if they knew their allies were close enough to finish the task and potentially share the critical information needed to catch up. But even for them, the distinction between on-the-spot and pit-stop penalties remains supreme.
Because even an alliance can't save you from having to sit for 8 hours while your partners walk past you.
Precisely. If you quit a roadblock, you still finish the leg and serve the time at the pit stop. If you quit a scramble, you are immediately exposed. The commitment by the production to enforce real-time consequences for taking the easy way out is clear, even if the penalty duration is shorter than the old 24-hour standard. It ensures that the race remains a test of endurance and task completion, not just strategy.
Now we move to the moments that truly stick in the memory, the iconic images, task failures, and the unique flavors brought by the international versions of the race.
The race is defined by its ability to generate both profound beauty and absurd high-stakes catastrophe. And there is no greater example of competitive catastrophe turned into pop culture than the watermelon incident from season 17.
Oh, we have to relive this. It happened during a medieval catapult task in Gloucester, Massachusetts.
Teams had to launch a watermelon at a night target. Claire's aim was off, the catapult malfunctioned, and the projectile ricocheted with shocking velocity directly back into her face.
It's horrifying and hilarious simultaneously, and it became and remains the single most viral clip in the franchise's history. But the sources suggest this moment of intense physical pain actually highlighted Claire's competitive focus.
It did. After the immediate shock, her partner, Brooke, encouraged her to continue, and she exhibited immense grit to successfully finish the task immediately afterward. It's cited as a core moment of mental fortitude under physical duress, right up there with famous moments like Flo's meltdowns or my ox is broken in terms of race legends.
We discussed the Mentos Marathon earlier as a psychological low point. Let's revisit the cultural impact of that specific task in Amazing Race Canada 3.
That Paris task recreating famous works of art using only Mentos was a masterpiece of deliberate, brutal time consumption. The disparity in performance was staggering. Natalie, one of the early teams, approached it with precision and finished in a fast 90 minutes.
But the later team suffered immensely, particularly Michelle.
Michel's experience was compounded by the fact that he had alienated competitors earlier in the race, meaning he had no one to assist or encourage him. He was alone with the mounting neurological fatigue. He spent an agonizing 8 hours on that single task,
Oh,
meticulously placing tiny candy pieces.
8 hours.
And was ultimately overtaken not only by the teams who were ahead of him, but by teams who had been U-turned and were still able to pass him while he was mentally locked.
It became a textbook case in how isolation and cognitive fatigue compound failure in the race environment.
It absolutely proves that task complexity isn't just about physical strength. It's often about demanding cognitive endurance when the brain is already depleted.
And for sheer task difficulty, we need to return to season 17 and talk about the Hong Kong detour from hell, which came during the crucial penultimate leg.
The sources describe the tasks in that leg as being straight out of hell due to their immense difficulty and the high pressure of being so close to the finish line. The notorious roadblock involved going into a marketplace and having to find pieces of fake food amongst hundreds of real food items.
And if you chose incorrectly, you had to eat the fake food.
No, if you guessed incorrectly, you had to eat the real food that you had incorrectly identified as fake.
Oh, that's worse.
Much worse.
Hmm?
The sheer ambiguity of the task, trying to differentiate plastic from real meat, for instance, combined with the exhaustion and the stakes, made it a true pressure test. The analysis noted they were genuinely surprised that no competitor simply quit the roadblock, even with the lengthy penalty involved.
The US version gets the most attention, but the international versions, Canada, TARC, and Australia, Kairos, showcase distinct production philosophies rooted in their funding models and local audiences.
TARC, for example, operates under what fans call the brawn and brand model. Their focus is historically domestic, showcasing Canadian locations and indigenous cultures, which is a major draw for the local audience.
But the funding model is the defining feature. TARC is notorious for intense, unavoidable product placement.
The analysis highlights the depth of the brand deals needed to fund a high production value show that often stays domestic. Beyond the omnipresent CLF bar sign-in board, we saw challenges that required teams to give a full sales pitch on 20 different features of a new vehicle model,
So it's basically a commercial.
essentially turning the race into a high-stakes, timed commercial presentation.
That significantly alters the nature of the challenge, replacing problem-solving with memorization and presentation skills.
It does. It requires a completely different skill set than navigating a market or completing a physical task. However, TARC also introduced an excellent gameplay mechanic that counteracts the systematic collusion we saw in the US version, the face-off.
How does the face-off mechanic discourage super alliances?
The face-off pits two teams against each other head-to-head in a direct, usually quick challenge. Only the winner advances.
Ooh!
This is brilliant because if you're in a Mind 5 style alliance, you cannot coordinate answer sharing or strategic help when you're directly competing against an ally or even a foe. In a face-off, only one team can win the confrontation, forcing direct rivalry, which is the exact opposite of collusion.
That makes TARC a different strategic beast entirely. But we can't move on without celebrating one of the great sources of cross-cultural humor from TARC 3, Suki's comical struggle with French in Paris.
That leg was a masterclass in good-natured linguistic failure. The moment her train arrives in Paris, the pressure was immediate. Suki immediately began demanding a taxi, rapido, to the Parc de Triomphe, a chaotic mix of Spanish, Italian, and English, none of which was French.
And it compounded throughout the leg. She used uno when trying to order a single coffee, yelled excusez while darting through traffic, and replied no problemo to a patron's merci.
Despite this utter destruction of the French language, or perhaps because of the sheer panic determination it illustrated, she and her partner finished second in that leg.
Incredible.
It's an anecdote that perfectly captures how raw, focused effort can sometimes overcome massive communication barriers in the race environment.
Switching gears to the Amazing Race Australia, Taraus, we find a different culture entirely, described in the sources as the flaws and philanthropy model.
The Network 10 era of Taras embraced a much more fun and silly atmosphere than the high-stakes US version. This tone was reinforced by their frequent use of celebrity teams racing for charity. However, it was also characterized by a degree of chaotic production.
Give us a detailed example of the production chaos. What was the mystery of the missing twist?
In Season 5, the producers extensively promoted a major T-junction twist in all their preseason press. This was described as a massive structural change, where all remaining teams would be split into two super teams for the rest of the leg, fundamentally altering the dynamics.
Well, what happened?
The twist was never used in the actual broadcast because a team had to be medically evacuated just before it was scheduled.
Oh.
But the promotion wasn't pulled from future marketing materials, leaving fans perpetually confused about the massive structural twist that never materialized.
It illustrates a more relaxed, perhaps less meticulously controlled production environment than the US version. And their unique philanthropic model led to an absolutely unprecedented finale.
Season 7, the Celebrity Edition, produced a storybook ending that would be unthinkable in the US version. The final 3 celebrity teams arrived at the mats simultaneously.
At the same time.
At the same time. And rather than racing for individual victory, they agreed to split the grand prize money evenly across their 3 chosen charities.
That's a total rejection of the competitive premise.
It is. The sources praised it as a beautiful storybook ending because the participants were driven by charity, not personal wealth. It highlights a core difference. For a charity season, the humanitarian goal superseded the competitive outcome. Fans were quick to point out, though, that if that had occurred in a regular money-driven season, it would be viewed as an outrageously inappropriate betrayal of the competitive spirit.
It underscores how the cultural expectations of competition shift drastically based on the motivation $1 million versus a good cause.
Finally, the race's global nature means the destination itself is part of the story. The pit stops often serve as powerful destination marketing, carrying immense visual and emotional weight.
The analysis highlights the power of rare access. Think back to Season 1, where the pit stop was right at the Sphinx in Egypt.
That location is iconic because modern tourists are generally kept far away. For the racers to stand right next to the statue's paw, checking in with Phil, created an image that few viewers could ever replicate in real life, cementing its visual impact.
Then you have locations that carry an emotional, historical burden, fundamentally changing the tone of the show for that leg.
The House of Slaves in Senegal is the primary example. The pit stop here was profoundly emotionally heavy, forcing teams and viewers to confront a devastating piece of history. One source noted it was definitely not cool or exciting, but deeply necessary and important for a global travel show.
We also see the importance of locations that signify a new chapter. The start of Season 33, for instance, in London's Natural History Museum, beneath the magnificent blue whale skeleton.
That immediately provided a dramatic, awe-inspiring launchpad. And on the flip side, we have locations that simply showcase stunning cityscapes, like the Lions Pavilion overlooking Victoria Harbor in Hong Kong, capturing the frantic energy of global commerce.
Or architectural gems like the Bolgati Palace in Kochi, India, a stunning Dutch-built heritage hotel featured in Season 20. These locations are the reward for the racers, and they provide the audience with a unique, inspirational view of the world they might never otherwise encounter.
The ability of the race to seamlessly integrate these breathtaking, high-impact cultural and historical sites into a fast-paced competition is a major reason for its longevity.
So this deep dive has shown us the profound resilience and adaptation of the Amazing Race franchise. Logistically, we saw the incredible pivots required to survive global threats. From chartering a Boeing 757 to create that highly controlled mobile bubble to increasing the episode runtime by 50% due to external strike demands.
Structurally, these pivots led to permanent changes, particularly the ability to maintain time gaps between teams using chartered flights and the necessary adoption of the 90-minute format, allowing for richer, deeper storytelling. Strategically, we saw the evolution of cooperation into systematic collusion, evidenced by the Mind 5, even though these alliances inevitably dissolve under the pressure of the impending prize.
And beneath all the logistics and strategy is the incredible psychological crucible. We noted how the intense, isolating pressure mimics individual sports, overwhelming the brain's emotional regulation circuits, that limbic medial prefrontal circuit, leading to profound mental blocks and exhaustion.
And this intense pressure not only creates high drama, but paradoxically can reward aggressive, dominating personalities, the toxic dyads, because their focus on goal achievement trumps the need for healthy interpersonal dynamics. This brings us back to the audience experience, specifically the research on outgroup antipathy.
Outgroup antipathy, or schadenfreude, is the pleasure we as viewers feel when we see our competitors, the outgroup, suffer or fail dramatically.
Exactly. And if we analyze the most iconic, viral moments that define the show's legacy, they're invariably moments of profound suffering or stress. Claire taking a watermelon to the face, Michelle agonizing for 8 hours over Mentos, the public emotional implosions of the toxic dyads. The show feeds on the competitive high wire.
So as you reflect on this deep dive and consider the next time you tune in, here's the final provocative thought for you to mull over. Does the show's enduring success rely on deliberately magnifying these painful, stressful moments of failure? And if so, when you find yourself glued to the screen, cheering a team forward while simultaneously reveling in the misfortune of those falling behind, are you truly rooting for success, or are you ultimately rooting for the competitive schadenfreude that makes the high-stakes struggle of the race so compulsively watchable? What is the real source of the high drama?